Welcome to the channel where we dig into the stories that matter, stories of betrayal, resilience, and the fight for justice. I'm Claire, and today I'm sharing the moment my family's lies came crashing down. Picture this, a sunlit dining room in my mother's Seattle townhouse, October 2024. The table's set with delicate china, the air smells of burnt croissants and bitter mimosas, and my mother, Evelyn Harper, a retired corporate lawyer with a talent for tearing people apart, fixes me with her icy stare. "You're irrelevant, Claire," she says, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't pretend you matter." My older sister, Natalie, a 32-year-old influencer obsessed with her follower count, smirks over her phone. "Honestly, we forget you're even here half the time," she adds, her laugh slicing through the room like a shard of ice. I don't flinch. I don't cry. I've spent 28 years learning to wear my face like armor, hiding the hurt where they can't use it against me. But that day, I'm done hiding. I tap my spoon against my coffee mug, the soft clink cutting through their cruelty. "This'll be quick," I say, my voice steady as steel. 3 sentences. By the second sentence, Evelyn's face drains of color, and I feel the air shift like the moment before a storm breaks wide open. That brunch wasn't just a meal. It was a battlefield, a ritual of judgment disguised as a family tradition. I'd been a freelance journalist for years, digging into other people's truths while ignoring my own. But that Sunday, I was ready to unearth the secrets my family thought they'd buried forever. We were halfway through a rubbery spinach quiche, the kind that tastes like disappointment, when Evelyn launched her attack. She had a habit of turning every family gathering into a courtroom, with her as the judge and me as the eternal defendant. "You're irrelevant," she repeated, swirling her lavender mimosa like she was delivering a weather report. Natalie, scrolling through her Instagram likes, chimed in with her usual venom. "We forget you're here half the time," she said, laughing like we were all in on the joke. I wasn't laughing. I reached for my mug, the ceramic warm against my palm, and gave it a deliberate tap with my spoon. "This'll be quick," I said again, my voice low but unyielding. 3 sentences. "For Dad, this one's for you." I slid a plain gray folder across the table, the paper whispering against the crisp linen tablecloth. No drama, no theatrics, just a quiet push that felt heavier than the world. Natalie's eyebrows shot up like she thought I was handing out press releases for my latest article. Victor, Evelyn's second husband, a smug real estate developer who'd replaced my dad when I was 13, leaned forward, his gold watch glinting under the chandelier. He probably expected a thank you note for the birthday card he'd sent me 3 years late. But Evelyn, she froze. Her manicured nails hovered over the folder, her eyes narrowing like she could sense the danger inside. She flipped it open. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Her face changed with every word, like she was watching her life unravel in slow motion. Her fingers trembled, the paper crinkling in her grip. Victor's smug grin faded, his face paling to match the white tablecloth. Natalie's fork froze midair, a piece of quiche dangling like her entire world was about to drop. "You manipulative little snake," Evelyn hissed, her voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a blade. Victor stood, his chair screeching against the hardwood floor. "You told me you got rid of that," he snapped, his voice tight with panic. I stood too, smoothing my sweater, my movements deliberate. I slung my bag over my shoulder and met their eyes, one by one. "The originals are with people who matter," I said, my tone as calm as a still lake. "This copy's just for you to enjoy." Then I walked out, the click of my boots echoing in the stunned silence. I didn't take my coat. I didn't need it. The autumn air was sharp against my skin, but I needed the clarity more than the warmth. Let's rewind. 6 months earlier, I'd moved back into their sprawling Seattle townhouse, claiming I couldn't afford my studio apartment in Portland anymore. I'd told them my freelance gigs weren't paying enough, that I needed a safety net. Evelyn had sighed, her disapproval as loud as a foghorn, but she'd let me in on the condition I paid rent, cooked dinners, and kept my attitude in check. Natalie, who still lived there rent-free despite her influencer income, didn't have to lift a finger. She left her smoothie blenders unwashed and her opinions unfiltered. I got the basement storage room, a damp space with a flickering light bulb and a futon that smelled like mildew. At night, the furnace groaned like it was haunted, and I'd lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, reminding myself why I was there. I wasn't there to rebuild our family. I wasn't there because I had nowhere else to go. I was there to find the truth they thought I'd never uncover. I kept my mask on at brunch. I poured the orange juice, the pitcher cold against my hands. I passed the butter, the dish heavy in my grip. I even forced a smile when Victor made his tired jokes about Gen Z not knowing how to use a dishwasher, ironic since I was the one scrubbing his plates every night. I said thank you when Evelyn handed me a napkin, her gesture as hollow as her affection. No one asked about my latest article, a piece on local corruption that had taken months to research. No one asked how I was holding up after losing my apartment. The closest I got to care was Victor's offhand, "You still driving that beat-up hatchback?" For Christmas, I got a generic candle labeled "World's Okayest Daughter," clearly a last-minute grab from the drugstore. Natalie got a designer handbag and a spa weekend in Napa for her self-care. I got to scrub the grout in the guest bathroom. My childhood wasn't the kind you'd see on a family sitcom filled with quirky traditions and laugh tracks. Mine was more like a psychological thriller with no happy ending in sight. From the outside, we looked perfect. Annual holiday photos with forced smiles, trips to the Oregon coast that somehow made it into Evelyn's curated albums, a fridge plastered with Natalie's mediocre watercolor paintings like she was a prodigy. But inside, it was a different story. I was the spare part in a family that didn't need me. Natalie was the golden child, the one who could spill nail polish on the carpet and be called creative. I once forgot to take the trash out and got grounded for a week for being irresponsible. When I was 10, I won a poetry contest at school, a small win that made me feel seen. I ran home clutching the certificate, my heart racing with pride. I showed Evelyn, expecting a smile, maybe a hug. She barely glanced at it. "Poetry won't pay the bills, Claire," she said, tossing it onto the counter. "Focus on math." That same week, Natalie got a Most Enthusiastic Participant award for a school play she'd barely rehearsed for. Evelyn framed it and hung it in the living room. Those moments carved away at me, leaving scars that didn't show. I started to wonder if I was the problem, if I was too quiet, too boring, too unlovable. The only person who didn't make me feel like an afterthought was my dad, Michael. He wasn't loud or flashy, but he was steady. He'd sit with me on the porch swing, helping me with my book reports, his voice soft as he explained metaphors. He made the best blueberry pancakes, always shaping them into stars because he knew I loved astronomy. He listened when I rambled about constellations, his eyes crinkling with a smile as he remembered every detail. But Evelyn hated him. She'd snap at him for breathing too loudly, for existing too quietly, for not fitting her idea of success. I didn't understand why she despised him so much. Not until everything broke apart. I was 11, curled up on the couch with a bowl of stale pretzels, half watching a cooking show I didn't care about. Natalie was upstairs, probably filming another makeup tutorial. Evelyn was pacing the room, her phone glued to her hand. She stopped abruptly, turned off the TV, and sat beside me, her perfume sharp and overwhelming. "I need to show you something serious," she said, her tone heavy. She held out her phone, the screen glowing with a single message: "If you take her, I'll kill you both." "This is from your father," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "You need to know what kind of man he really is." My stomach dropped, the pretzels turning to ash in my mouth. I stared at the words, my brain refusing to process them. She told me Michael was dangerous, that she'd always suspected he was unhinged, that she was filing for full custody to protect me. She rubbed my back, her touch cold despite the gesture, and said I didn't need to be afraid anymore. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen, like the ground had vanished beneath me. The aftermath was a blur. Court hearings. Silence. Rules. No calls, no visits, no explanations, just a clean cut. Michael was erased from my life overnight, like he'd never existed. Evelyn told me to be grateful that she'd saved me. But I didn't feel saved. I felt hollow. The years that followed were what Evelyn called the restructuring phase, a term that made me laugh bitterly in hindsight. She didn't restructure anything, she just tightened her grip. I became her emotional punching bag, her live-in maid, the daughter she didn't want but couldn't discard. Natalie grew louder, more entitled, her cruelty sharper with every passing year. I faded into the background, invisible unless I was needed to clean up their messes. I tried not to think about Michael. I buried him in a mental box labeled threat, locking away the memories of his warmth. But some things don't stay buried. There were moments, small, jagged ones, that cracked the box open. I'd hear a friend talk about their dad teaching them to ride a bike, and I'd feel a pang so deep it stole my breath. The message never sat right with me. Michael wasn't the violent type. He was the man who teared up during animated movies, who apologized if he even sounded stern, who told me he loved me every time we spoke. But I didn't voice my doubts. Questioning one lie meant questioning everything, and I wasn't ready for that. Not then. By my mid-20s, the doubts grew louder, the ache heavier. I was 26, sitting in my Portland apartment, a draft of an article on my laptop screen. It was 2 a.m. and I couldn't sleep. The message haunted me, a ghost I couldn't exorcise. Michael wasn't the kind of man to send death threats. He was the man who'd taught me how to spot Orion in the night sky, who'd laughed at my terrible puns. So I did something reckless. I pulled up his old number, my fingers trembling as I typed, "Hi, I don't know if this is still your number, but I wanted to say hello. Claire." I hit send before I could overthink it. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Claire, I've been waiting 15 years for this." We met 3 days later at a quiet park on the outskirts of Tacoma, a neutral space with wide fields and a duck pond that shimmered in the morning light. I half expected him to look different, harder, maybe, or broken. But he was the same Michael, just grayer, his shoulders a little more stooped. We sat on a bench that would rough under my hands and sipped coffee from paper cups. The steam warmed my face as I gathered the courage to ask about the message. He didn't flinch. He just shook his head, his voice steady but heavy. "I didn't write it. I didn't send it. I never would." He didn't plead or cry, just apologized for the pain I'd carried. And I believed him. Not because he had evidence, but because my gut stopped screaming the moment he spoke. That was the spark. I needed answers. I wasn't a detective, but I was a journalist. I knew how to dig. I enrolled in an online course, got certified in digital forensics, learned how to trace metadata, pull records, follow money trails. It wasn't glamorous. It was late nights, endless spreadsheets, and a lot of coffee. But I had a purpose. I moved back into Evelyn's house, playing the role of the struggling daughter, all while searching for the truth. I started with an old desktop computer I found in the attic, hidden behind a box of Natalie's old pageant trophies. It was password protected, but I'd learned enough to crack it. Inside were folders, messy, labeled things like docs_2010 and financials. One caught my eye, draft_emails. I opened it, my heart pounding. There it was, a Word doc with the message, "If you take her, I'll kill you both." Saved 6 days before Evelyn claimed it was sent. There were edits in the margins, a comment bubble that read, "Too harsh." That wasn't the worst of it. I found emails between Evelyn and Victor dated before their marriage, plotting to make Michael look unstable. They'd fabricated the message to secure custody, to paint him as a threat. And the money, Evelyn had claimed Michael lost half their assets in a bad investment during the divorce. But I found bank records, wire transfers to offshore accounts, shell companies in Victor's name. They'd stolen everything, the house, the savings, Michael's small tech startup, and left him with nothing but a ruined reputation. I printed it all, made copies, and gave one set to Michael. The folder I slid across the table at brunch? That was just a memento. I didn't go back after that brunch. I walked out, the Seattle air biting at my skin, and checked into a small Airbnb in Bellevue under a fake name, just to keep things quiet while the fallout settled. 2 hours later, my phone lit up with texts from Natalie. "What did you just do?" she wrote, followed by, "Mom's losing it, Victor's screaming, and they won't tell me anything." I didn't reply. I wanted them to stew, to feel the walls closing in, to wonder how their carefully constructed lies had caught fire. Let's pause here for a moment. I've spent years wondering if I was the villain in their story or mine. Have you ever had to confront a truth that changed everything? How did you find the courage to act? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story while we finish this journey together. 3 nights later, there was a knock at my door. I peered through the peephole, my pulse quickening. It was Michael, his face tired but calm. He didn't say hello, just offered a small smile and said, "I got the call. It's happening." The lawyer had filed everything, reopened the case, started the process to reclaim the money, the house, Michael's reputation. We sat on the threadbare couch in my rental, sipping chamomile tea, the steam curling between us. I told him how I'd found the evidence, my voice steady but my hands shaking as I recounted the late nights, the fear, the anger. He listened, his eyes soft, and when I finished, he said, "You didn't have to do this." I shook my head. "I didn't do it for you," I said. "I did it for me." The texts started pouring in. "Natalie, are you really destroying our family over something so old? You made Mom cry." "Evelyn, you're not finished, don't think you are." I didn't respond. I knew what was coming and they had no idea how much I still held back. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived at their house, a thick envelope, the kind that demands attention. I wasn't there, but I heard about it. Evelyn opened it in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she read the first page. She dropped her wine glass, the red liquid pooling on the tile like blood. Victor tried to play it cool, but his name was on page 2. He must have panicked, Googling penalties for offshore fraud. Natalie kept texting, begging me to fix things as if I could undo the lies, the theft, the years of being treated like I didn't exist. The court filings were ironclad. Emails, drafts, bank records, a paper trail of deception. The judge didn't hesitate. She called it a systematic pattern of fraud that undermined custody, finances, and personal safety. The ruling, full restitution. Every cent they'd stolen had to be returned, with penalties, with interest. They liquidated everything, the townhouse, the cars, the vacation condo in Whidbey Island. Victor claimed ignorance, saying he'd trusted Evelyn's financial expertise, but his signature on the transfers told a different story. They sold the house at a loss within a month. Evelyn moved into a rundown apartment in Tacoma, the kind with peeling paint and a radiator that hissed all night. For the first time, she didn't throw a party to mark the occasion. But Evelyn wasn't done. A week after the ruling, she tried one last desperate move. She created an X account in my name, using my profile picture, copying my bio, even reposting an old tweet of mine word for word. Then she started posting wild claims that Michael had abused her, that I was unhinged, that we'd hacked her accounts. It was pathetic and sloppy. A digital forensics contact traced the IP address back to her apartment in less than 20 minutes. Same Wi-Fi, same browser history, same device she used for her online yoga classes. The judge didn't even blink. "Ms. Harper," she said, her voice flat, "you fabricated a message, stole from your ex-husband, and now you're impersonating your daughter online." Evelyn tried to cry, but it fell flat. Even Victor wouldn't meet her eyes. "Natalie?" She disappeared the moment the money dried up. No goodbye, no apology, just a quiet unfollow on X and, I assume, a frantic search for a job that didn't require accountability. I wasn't surprised. Michael bought a small house in Olympia. A cozy place with a wraparound porch and a backyard that caught the golden afternoon light. He called it peaceful. A word that felt like a bomb after years of chaos. The day he got the keys, he invited me over. I walked through the front door, the scent of fresh paint and cedar greeting me, and he handed me a mug of coffee, the warmth seeping into my hands. "No big speech," he said, his voice soft. "Just, thank you." We sat on the porch, the silence between us comfortable, the kind that doesn't demand anything. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without bracing for the next blow. He asked what I'd do next. I smiled, the horizon stretching out before us. "Live," I said, "like I don't have to prove I deserve to." A week later, an email from Evelyn landed in my inbox. Subject line, "You'll see the truth someday." It was a rambling mess. Accusations of betrayal, claims she'd done it all for me. A signature that read love, Mom. I didn't reply. I archived it in a folder labeled irrelevant noise and moved on. There was no viral post, no tell-all interview, no grand announcement of my healing. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. And I found it. In a kitchen that smelled of fresh bread. In a living room with books I'd chosen. In a father who made terrible dad jokes without a hint of malice. They called me irrelevant, a ghost in their story. But the thing about ghosts, we see everything. We remember. We learn how to unravel the lies others build their lives on. And when we speak, we don't need to scream. We bring proof. I still think about that day at brunch, the folder sliding across the table, the way their faces changed. Some nights, I wonder if I could have walked away, let their lies fester in the shadows, built my life without touching the past. But then I remember the years I spent silent, the weight I carried, the way they counted on me staying small. I don't regret it, but I want to know what you think. Did I cross a line, or did I do what I had to? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading everyone, and if stories like this resonate with you, if you've ever had to fight for your truth, hit subscribe to channel. Let's keep uncovering those hidden stories together, because the truth always finds a way to surface.